Speaker.
I call Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I was so enjoying that member's speech until he got to those really hurtful things about the previous Labor government. It's tragic. He was talking about the things that matter so much to New Zealanders, such as the safety of our children and those terrible people that are making methamphetamine and doing all those hurtful things, and then he himself goes and hurts our feelings by criticising the fantastic previous Labor government, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to start though, Mr. Speaker, because Puta Paraone earlier this evening spoke about the genesis of this bill, and he mentioned the name of the late great Honourable Brian Donnelly, not just a wonderful member of Parliament, but I knew him before he was in politics as a fantastic principal up in Whangarei, and he was also a fairly handy rugby league player for Moirua Tigers in his day. And then we move on to Esaneti Lolly Taylor, who actually brought this bill to the House, and I'd just like to acknowledge her. I do have to say though that the Labor Party is not going to support this bill, not because we don't disagree with the intent of the bill, Mr. Speaker. In fact, we agree entirely with the intent of the bill to protect our most vulnerable children. Labor is committed, absolutely committed, as are all parties across the House, to protecting the most vulnerable, in particular our children. And as Jonathan Young did say, anybody who would think of doing something as heinous as baking pea in the House in the presence of children deserve the law book to be absolutely thrown at them. The Labor Party is absolutely committed to the physical safety of children. It's committed to the preserving the emotional safety of children, the cultural safety of children, Mr. Speaker. It's committed to protecting the educational safety of children. That's why we've spent much of this evening, this afternoon, and many members' days previous to debating the extended paid parental leave bill. Mr. Speaker, it's why we always talk about the need for warm, dry homes so that children and families are warm and safe. It's why we're always talking about poverty, how we need to expend all our energies in reducing poverty across New Zealand. It's why we talk about our concern about the cost of food and healthy food in particular, and also overcrowding in homes. We talk about these issues because we care about giving our children in New Zealand, throughout New Zealand, the best start in life. And I just want to talk about an incident that happened when I was principal at Kaitaia Intermediate School, where the local youth aid officer came into my office and said, "Kelvin, we need to take a brother and sister, a girl who is year 8, 12 years of age, and her younger brother, year 7, 11 years of age. We want to take them for drug testing." And I said, what, marijuana? And he said, "No, this is P. We want to test them for P." I said, "Well, why would you suspect that these kids have been doing P?" He says, "Well, to be perfectly honest, their parents are doing P. These children, we have interviewed them, and they have a detailed knowledge of how to manufacture P. They can explain in graphic detail, how to manufacture P. They can also explain in great detail the process you go through to actually consume it." And he mentioned something about taking light bulbs, Mr. Speaker. You were a policeman in your day, and somehow they use broken light bulbs to consume P. So these children had this intimate knowledge that they could explain in quite some detail at 11 and 12 years of age. They could explain how to manufacture and to consume P. So they actually took these kids away and they did test them and found that no, the children actually hadn't consumed it themselves. But the youth aid officer said to me, "But Kelvin, they display all the symptoms of somebody who had been using P. And I said, well, explain to me. He said, well, are these kids tired? Do they come to school and fall asleep? I said, yeah, actually, they do. He said, well, when your parents are having a P binge, it makes them hyper. They'll stay awake. They'll party for 3, 4, 5 days at a time without any sleep. That means these children are also kept awake because their parents are partying with their mates. They can't get to sleep, so they're also displaying the symptoms of sleep deprivation. Physiologically, they just can't cope with it, so they come to school to have a rest. He said, are these kids hungry? And I said, yeah, they're always hungry. We put on breakfast for them. And he said, well, that's another symptom, is that when the parents are on their P binges, they don't get hungry, so they don't think to go out and buy food for the kids. In fact, their minds aren't in that space where they would think to go and buy food. All the food's used up in day 1 and day 2 of the P binge. The kids go for 4 or 5 days without food in the house, so they'll turn up to school hungry as well. And he said, this is what happens. This is how insidious it is that parents will have their children. You know, and we as parents, you know, we want to have our children, we want to love them and nurture them and make sure they grow up safely. And David Clinton's spoken about how his grandkids have come around and you put everything up high so that, you know, they can't have things fall on them and they won't play with the light sockets and that. There's some parents in this world, Mr. Speaker, who just absolutely don't give a toss about those little things. They're too busy on these P binges where their kids are sleep deprived, where they're food deprived, and basically those children are not in a situation where they can actually go to school and learn, and they're in danger of just repeating the cycle over and over and over again, Mr. Speaker. This bill, the intent is laudable, but we won't support it because the Sentencing Act and the Crimes Act already basically cover these, the intent of this bill. For example, the Crimes Act, section 152 says it is the duty of a parent or guardian to provide the necessaries and protect from injury. Everyone who is a parent or is a person in place of a parent who has actual care or charge of a child under the age of 18 years is under a legal duty to provide that child with necessaries, or A, to provide that child with necessaries, and B, to take reasonable steps to protect that child from injury. Those parents that I've spoken about are not taking any steps to provide, to protect their children from injury. In fact, it was just a wonder that those children hadn't actually consumed P themselves, because if they had, they would have been instantly addicted. P is one of the most addictive substances there are. Nicotine's probably the only thing that's more addictive, strangely enough. But it's just a wonder that those two children that I described hadn't actually consumed, and at that stage of their lives hadn't become addicted to P, although, you know, I would have concerns now, some 7 or 8 years on, that they haven't fallen into that lifestyle as well. In fact, I have to give them credit, Mr. Speaker, for getting themselves up every day, getting out of bed, getting themselves dressed and getting themselves to school. And I was thinking about it, it's probably because school was the one safe place in their lives where they could get up, they weren't going, you know, they could get some sleep in the middle of the day when they're meant to be learning. They could get a decent feed in the mornings, and they were relatively safe, Mr. Speaker. Also, the Sentencing Act, I just want to refer to that, section 9A, it says cases involving violence against or neglect of child under 14 years of age. 9A2 that says the court must take into account the following aggravating factors to the extent that they are applicable in the case. Part B of that says, in relation to any harm resulting from the offence, any serious or long-term physical or psychological effect on the victim. So that's an aggravating factor, taking into account the psychological effect on the victim, and I just wonder, Mr. Speaker, about the psychological effect that those parents' behaviour had on their two children. Labour will not be supporting this bill, although we do support the intent. Kia ora.